We founded the company in 2015, and honestly, it was tough. Stripe was going to rule the world. Every mistake we learn from, every failure is a way that you're putting more cement into the wall of your business and into your character and into your conviction and into your culture.
In this episode, we speak to Rob Lincolne. We cover from Rob's time living in a trailer in his teens in America through to how time at a township in South Africa shaped the mission-led company that he runs today.
I think true innovation is a lot more risky. It relies on the insight that people have in the trenches, like you, and that can be hard to put into a spreadsheet. And it's not so much to do with your LinkedIn history. It's got more to do with your character, your tenacity, your energy, your passion that you bring to the room. You put all those people in a room, watch the magic happen. Like, I didn't go get a degree in payments, doesn't exist. You know, here we are.
It's a privilege for me to have people in who have achieved cool shit like you. And the whole point of this is to allow people like you a chance to take a breath, to take a step away from work and tell your story. So the first question I always ask is, where was school and did you enjoy it?
Oh, wow. School was in a combination of America. We lived in a trailer home in the South, actually, in South Carolina.
So have you got any brothers and sisters?
I do, yeah.
So there's a whole load of you living in a trailer. Sorry,
yeah, no, we were. I think there's a word for that. White trash. But I was born in Tasmania, in a little country town in Australia. Yeah. But when I was young, we moved to the US and then moved back to Australia.
So was that following someone's job, mum or dad's job?
Yeah, Dad was studying there, and we went over as a family, and so we lived out the stereotype. We were a homeschooled family living in a trailer home in America, and that's wherever I go. People say, you don't sound Australian enough, and I feel like I'm always a disappointment to every Aussie out there. Not quite enough of an Australian accent to be Australian at home, and not quite enough of wherever I am to be not Australian. So I'm just in this no man's land. Yeah. So school was a very diverse and creative experience for me, which was fun.
Amazing. So how old were you when you went to America?
9, 10.
9, and you stayed there until?
Yeah, I stayed there for just shy of 2 years.
Shit. And you were homeschooled?
Yeah.
So your dad was an academic, so he went there to study?
Homeschooled by my mum. Okay. My dad was going through a shift in his career and his life. Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do with meaning of life, purpose in life, which was great. And it was incredible for me, even as a young kid, to see him change gears so dramatically to focus on things that he felt were really important. So that was actually a theological seminary for him, and it was a really interesting experience for us as a family. And
fair play to your mum, by the way.
Yeah.
Because your dad's like sort of going through a bit of a change. And she's like, yeah, all right, we'll move to a trailer in America.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Look, I have to say, having kids now, I don't know how she did it. It's what a mountain to climb, but what a gift to give as well. I think in terms of learning and experience, and the opportunity for us kids was we made some of our best friends, and you would do school in the morning, and then in the afternoon you pursue whatever it is you're most passionate about. Is it music? Is it sport? Is it whatever? So you have a lot more time to invest in things, and I think that's why we do see some people with really interesting people who have backgrounds in homeschooling. Taylor Swift, Tim Tebow, all these guys did a lot of. And you can understand why, right? You want to spend 6 hours a day writing music. Yeah. It's hard to do it when you're at school. So, yeah, we feel really, really blessed.
Amazing. Yeah. So when that was done, you go back to Australia and you go back to normal school?
I did end up last few years at a normal school.
That must have been rubbish.
Yeah, look.
Well, there's a social thing at that age as well, right? So there's like a good of the social thing.
And I already had a good friends network, so it was a real shifting gears. But I think, it gave me the opportunity to just tick some regular academic boxes and build some new networks that I think, were really helpful, and friends that I have to this day. So I'm thankful for that. And then, from there on, actually enrolled in mechanical engineering, didn't go to a class, and went overseas, did some community aid, got a new focus on life, which ultimately led me on the journey I am now. But I think, you made a point earlier when we were talking. I think it's when you travel and you get proximity and context to the world as a whole and out of your bubble, you see things very differently.
100%.
Yeah.
That's mad. So were you having not been academic on the basis that you were doing half the amount of schooling? Like on a level, you'd have been less academic than the kids that were full time, or certainly studious, right?
Actually, look, it's surprising to many people. You actually get a lot more academic time in because statistically they say, at school, 40 to 50% of the time is crowd control. And when you're at home, you've got essentially a 3-to-1 teacher to student ratio, and you're working off the state curriculum anyway. So,
but you're just getting it done.
Yeah, most people I know who are homeschooled get to school and they find themselves they're about a year ahead of the curriculum. They're a year advanced, simply because the amount of learning that you can digest in such a concentrated period, 3 to 4 dedicated hours every day, and then you get to build out your extra curricular, experiences as well. So we feel really lucky, and it's not that there's a right or a wrong. It's just that was our experience. Yeah.
Amazing. So by the time you finished school, did you have any view on what you thought your career would be, or were you keeping your mind open because you saw the people that were your idols, your mum and dad, keeping their options open?
Oh, that's a great question. I wonder how many of us really know what our career Yeah.
I hate to do that.
Does anybody know what? Look, I couldn't. I think sitting here today, it's amazing the twists and turns life brings. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of what makes life exciting is that we have the ability to keep our eyes open to things that matter a lot to us as individuals, and that we have the opportunity to solve problems in society. And I think that we are innately capable as humans if we put our mind to anything. And, if we're willing to persevere, and I actually think if you're willing to care, and I think one of the challenges in life is actually just to care enough to give a shit about your fellow human and then to act. And I
because
think
they're two different things.
Yeah,
caring, but actually putting it into practice and doing stuff.
Yeah, caring and adding it to your story on Instagram, that's cool. Yeah. But walking across the road, that's another thing. Mm-hmm. And then even going beyond that. So I think, I think what's changed my life the most has been some of those, I guess, frontline experiences. Maybe there's a better term. But, after school, I did about 3 months in townships in South Africa.
I've been there as well.
Yeah.
Dude,
deeply
if there's a
humbled.
thing that will open your eyes, it is. I remember we did a rugby tour, and our first team was playing against the top South African schools, and our second team played against one of the township sides, and we went with them, and we were stood watching with the kids in this township, and they said, "Don't give the kids food because they'll get beaten up for the food if you give them food, right?" So I gave this, and I was like, "Fuck, I'll do what I want," and I gave this kiddie a packet of crisps, and he gave all of his mates a crisp, and he offered me the last crisp.
How'd that make you feel?
And I was like, if that kid, because I think of the little pricks at home that are nicking stuff off each other, and I thought, if that kid who has nothing can have the kindness in him to offer me his last crisp, I was just like, it was just a massive eye-opening experience. Yeah. That we end up innately selfish, but somebody, even despite the level of desperation they're facing, can still be kind. It definitely made me more kind, for sure, 100%. Which you'd have seen when you went there, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I have a similar story that I can never forget. That I think the feeling was humbled, embarrassed, and sort of slightly angry about the state of the world as well. I mean, I don't know what you took away from that experience personally for your career.
I don't know. It's just that you can always be kind regardless of the situation. And I think we often, whether we're angry or tired or anything else, kindness is usually the first thing that slips away.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you, road rage, all that sort of stuff, that happens when you're angry or tired or hungry or whatever. But I think being kind regardless of the situation is a really special thing to hold on to. And I think that's the thing that it taught me. Yeah,
and that is hard. That is a challenge, I think, especially after you've been woken up 2 or 3 times by a little kid, as you now know. You wake up in the morning, I do not feel like being kind today.
Yeah, but do it. But do it, make it part of who you are.
Yeah.
So what happened? So what happened in that township? What was the
Yeah. So my similar story was, and this really set the tone for a lot of what has been important to me in the choices that I make in business and in life. But like your story, I had the privilege of doing art therapy in juvenile prisons for kids who'd broken the law in really significant ways. Tough stuff. Out of townships, and there was this one guy by the name of Lewis who was in there. So the things were very almost capital style crime, and really, really horrible stuff with gangs. And I walked in there, did some art therapy. We got to know each other. By the end, we had a little rapport going. The things that he's had to do or done to stay alive, to protect his family, that now forced him to be in this prison away from society because he got caught for it. And, I walk out of that room with my blue passport and I go back to shiny skyscrapers and a latte, and he goes back to his cell. And I didn't get to choose to be born where I was born and how I was born, and he didn't either. And I'm not saying that we don't take responsibility, but I'm saying the unfairness of it really struck me. And, I think most of my choices since then have been oriented around how do you create opportunity for others? How do we steward what we've been gifted by virtue of our birth? And how do we utilize the assets and the resources around us for maximum impact? So it's a really funny way to end up in payments, right? but that, you got to do the most good you can with the time that you have available to you for the people who haven't been given so much. Because I feel like if I got to the end of my life and I went back to Lewis and he looked me in the eyes and I looked him in the eyes, and God willing, he's still alive. But if we got to the end, he'd be able to look at me and say, well, you did the right thing for what you were given. And I do take that, I guess that's kind of a calling is a word, but I'm aware of the unfairness.
Do you think even just the concept of Lewis, and I don't want to abstract it away from there was a person called Lewis, but I think, do you think that was a bit of a turning point for you? Is it that significant?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I pulled out of mechanical engineering and I did media, programming, other things, and I wanted to help not-for-profits tell their stories better and engage donors better, because I realized I couldn't be the aid worker in the prison. That wasn't my gift, but I had a creative mind, a business mindset. I had a set of tools, so I wanted to apply those in a different kind of way. And so that took me into not-for-profit digital strategy consulting. I did that for 6 or 7 years, and it was on that journey that we really learned about systemic problems in the payments world that we felt, if solved, could make a really big difference, and we could build a great business which itself could influence people's lives and create opportunity and hope. So it was, and even the way we hire people and just the whole thing had to have integrity to it, in line with, I think, the fact that injustice in the world matters and that business is a powerful force for good. And so how do we bring those two things together? So, I'm always inspired by Melanie Perkins from Canva. Yeah. And, Mel, I love her quote, there's better things to do with cash than hoard money.
Love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. I'm like, what, there is. And I think there's a lot of people of our generation who feel exactly the same. And there are things in this world that we feel are fundamentally not aligned, not where they need to be, and that we have the opportunity to do something. And so I think doing good is not just not doing the wrong thing. It's like proactively doing the right thing.
Whether you walk across the road or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That I didn't expect that to be how you ended up doing what you're doing. That there's a moment. I wonder, Lewis doesn't know how much of an impact he had. No. Which is a shame.
That's a powerful statement, though. I hadn't thought about it that way.
He doesn't know, because the choices you make about what quality of clothes you buy your kids have come from Lewis.
Choices about a lot of things. And I think if I could take everyone I know and everyone I meet, for a 2-week, experience, it's a horrendous word, spend 2 weeks in a township, similar to your experience, or where there's people less privileged or suffering, I think we'd come back much more compassionate and much more motivated, probably kinder, to your point. And I think we can get ourselves a little bit too much in a ambition bubble where we're looking at the next BMW. And I was very blessed. I was invited to join with a group of guys from a VC called Highland VC. Okay. And I have a lot of respect for the team there. And they invited a gentleman by the name of Arthur Brooks to come and talk at their conference. And he is I think I'm going to get this wrong, but Harvard University professor of happiness.
Shit, yes.
And it's the most oversubscribed, this is what we're told, most oversubscribed course at Harvard University, because, money isn't all there is. And what constitutes happiness it's not money. It's maybe some of the things that money can get you in terms of time, but you've got to tick these other boxes to feel satisfied, and that includes the sense of purpose, faith, family, friends. He has this set of thinking that he applies, and I have a lot of time for him. Yeah,
That's
and
cool,
he was recently interviewed by Tim Ferriss as well. It's an amazing listen. You should
listen.
look it up. Yeah,
I remember at Money 2020 in Las Vegas, they printed the badges out, and underneath the badge it said "Ask me about," and there was a line, and I wrote "Being happy."
Nice.
Because I could have written KYB, but who gives a shit, right? And people were coming up to me and they're like,
what did you say?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Right? And we've got, I've got a saying, happy wins. Because
Yeah.
actually, when you're at your happiest, you
Yes.
do your best work. The first thing is individual, but I suppose the slight backstory is I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to work in San Francisco for a fairly large tech company and a fairly important role in that company. And there was a lot of luxury afforded to me in that role. The way we flew, where we stayed, all that sort of stuff. It was one of those typical sort of Silicon Valley things. And I realised when I was doing that none of that made me happy. And what I realised was genuine conversation with decent people is one of the things that makes me really happy. Doing good, being kind, all these things that are the complete other end of the scale of the things that you think will make you happy in your early 20s. That's the irony of it. And I also think that talking about happiness is a beautiful conversation. What is it that makes you happy? And people are like, oh, I don't even really think about that. No one really gives it any attention, which is mental because it's the only thing that's important.
Yeah. And I think what I found amazing, even at this forum with the Highland guys, was the question is a little bit confronting, because we always think about happiness as this thing that I'm going for that's just over there.
It's really interesting, yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to actually it is possible to experience it now with some framing and some help. And yeah. I don't know. So I guess you inspired a lot of people at the end of that event.
Whether I did or not, I think the inspiration is an interesting thing as well, because everyone's got inspiration in them. Sometimes it just takes asking somebody a half decent question to get them thinking.
So what's your favorite question then in that?
What's the thing that makes you most happy?
Yeah.
Is one of them. That's my go-to. I think it's context dependent and the type of person, because if I meet one of my mum's friends who's a dinner lady at a school, the question I ask her might be a little bit different to if I meet someone who's set up a VC. You know what I mean? It's a slightly different thing. But what makes you happy?
And I'd hazard a guess that a lot of the answers revolve around friends, food, serving others,
connection. Yeah, not the fucking cars and whatever else.
The thing that we spend all our time going after.
Correct. So you've the thing that's most interesting here is you've decided to follow a greater cause and a passion caused by an amazing situation, a poor situation for him, but an amazing outcome. The bulk of your career, is it fair to say, has been as the CEO of Paydock, right?
Yeah, actually.
Now, if you look at the time, now it's the majority of your career.
Yeah, that's true.
So you set up that first business and did that. How did the idea for Paydock come about? Was it always Paydock? What's the story?
It wasn't always Paydock, and I never saw myself as being in payments. I think a lot of people find themselves in this industry. You would know accidentally.
Yep.
I'd love to know your story too.
Yep.
I think for me, the flip side of what we're doing is I like to do hard things. If it's a challenge, show me the challenge. Let's go.
Yes.
What is it?
I didn't realise quite how hard this thing would be.
Yeah.
But
Well,
fine.
100% me. My wife will tell you that. What's it? Two recent phrases I love. We didn't start this because we thought it would. We didn't start this because it was easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
Yeah,
is a classic one.
I love that.
And the other one about doing hard things. If it's not stretching, if it's not hard, I feel like it's actually a bit disrespectful to who we are as humans. So we've got to challenge ourselves, because what we can accomplish together is phenomenal if we put our minds to it. Now, throwing yourself off the cliff just to see what you're capable of is quite invigorating sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say as a CEO, that's not how we run the company on a day-to-day basis, but pushing the boundary of what we believe we can do and testing those boundaries. And I think doing that as an individual is really important, because you want that to be part of the DNA of what we can accomplish as a team at Paydock. So Paydock's 110 people now, and we want to all have that mindset where we're pushing ourselves. So how did we end up in Paydock, and how did we end up with Paydock? I ran an agency helping not-for-profits I earlier mentioned, and we began to pick up these themes around systemic, complex problems in the payment space. And we realized that there had to be a better way to solve what was happening in payments. And so I won't bore you with sort of the technicalities of that or your listeners, but fundamentally what we saw is that there was a need for an app store for fintech, for businesses and not-for-profits to capitalize on. Fintech was so volatile. There was so much fragmentation, commoditization, so much optionality. The appetite for risk was diminishing, particularly data risk, personal information, private information.
So this is a not-for-profit looking to consume services in that space.
That was the genesis. Fine. And so we just recently speaking to big not-for-profits who have big payments problems, but increasingly we saw that this was systemic. It was across the entire payments industry that there was too much confusion for merchants. There were too many dead ends and cul-de-sacs, too many hidden fees, inability to be able to quickly access the latest and the greatest, fraud tool, authentication tool, processing payment method.
So this would be something like, for example, a charity wants to accept donations. What's the mechanism that they use to accept those donations?
That was
for example.
That's right. That was the exact genesis of what we were doing. Cool. The recurring payments, the recurring donations, the whole thing.
Because they've got someone in there that's just like, Google, how do we accept payments, right? And then they speak to this company and it's super complex and they don't know what the pitfalls are and they're getting charged more. So you're going in and you're saying, we will commoditize, we will aggregate those people in the right place and we'll help you make the choice?
We actually really wanted to give them the choice, give them a platform they could use to manage their payments ecosystem without being locked into a solution that might not fit them in a year's time or 2 years' time. Fine. So they've got, it's like, when Amazon was a thing, Amazon AWS was a thing, and we took the servers out from under the desk and we put them up in the cloud. Initially, we were a bit like, okay, this is new. And then after a while, we all began to realize the benefits. And we are going through a bit of a paradigm change in payments where merchants are doing a similar thing with their payments now. And if I look at our pipeline, what our competitors are doing, it's incredible the amount of volume that's shifting towards this concept of a payments management platform, which is what we do. It's merchant friendly. It looks and feels like the best practice integration SDKs out there. All this. So being able to give merchants a greater sense of control and I guess control of their customer data, control of their technical infrastructure, control of the ultimate customer experience, control of cost for sure, but control of security, control of resilience, and getting so much back office and technical time back into their business that they previously used to spend investing in this, sticky taping this infrastructure together. We saw that as being of incredible benefit, and a little benchmark that I personally had, thinking back to our genesis and what gets me out of bed. I remember one day, idly Googling what is Australia's foreign aid budget every year.
Go on.
I think it was about 1.3 billion. I'm sure we could afford a bit more, but that's what it is or was at the time. And then I thought, well, this fintech space is huge and this problem is massive, hard, complex, massive. But if we stick at this for long enough, we could really make a go of this. And if we can connect A, B, C, D, E, and F, and we're tenacious and a little bit of luck, we could be making that kind of impact every single year as a company. And that was a real epiphany for me to go, well, hang on, companies are incredibly powerful forces for good. I don't, without disparaging anyone, I don't want to build a rocket ship. I'm thinking about Lewis, and I'm thinking about the hundred thousands of people like him who are not so privileged, and I'm like, that really gets me out of bed. And imagine if you could make a giant F-off business, that's doing 1.3 billion, and that's not unrealistic for the space that we're in and the space race that's on in payments right now. And I'm not kidding you, it is a space race. Our sector, all the reports now are saying 25% year-on-year growth just in the sector alone. So it's the fastest growing sector now, and I think we just happen to be here as one of the forerunners who've managed to not die, which I think is
existing
an
is
art in
cockroach
itself.
time to a certain extent, right? Who when you first started it out, did you look at and think they're ahead of us, we shouldn't bother?
That's a great question. We did a lot of research. There were some people out there who I have a great respect for who on deeper investigation had slightly different hypotheses around the problem. So I think getting your hypothesis right, and you don't know for sure which hypothesis is going to stick. So you got to be willing to keep hammering away at it. And we went through a couple of iterations, and we'll probably go through a few more. But I would say there's always forerunners. Everything you do is building on others. And there was sort of these two camps. There was over-the-top value-added providers who would seek to look at like what a Stripe does, then add to that recurring payments and whatever particular niche capability the merchant was looking for. And then we would look at others who tended to be more about vaulting and tokenizing and routing payments to different providers. But we didn't really find anyone who's sort of doing all of the above and who also had a very payment instrument, to use a technical term, instrument agnostic view of what constitutes a transaction. So is it a bank? Now we're very familiar with that. Is it a wallet? Is it a bank account? Is it a credit card? Is it whatever comes next? Now we're okay with agnostic payments. I think back then it was very much card focused or features over the top focused. And we didn't see someone who's bringing, so honestly, there wasn't a lot of precedent. And there was a couple of decent orchestrators. Some of those have now exited. And so there was probably 3 or 4 of us in the world pioneering, but there wasn't anyone really ahead. And, the VCs made this very clear to us. They would always say, where's your competition? And as you know, Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore, without competition, it's really hard to sell and it's really hard to, So we're really fortunate now. There's competition.
We found that hard. We found that hard because we've done something in a different way.
Yep.
And it makes things difficult, which is ironic because you don't think it will. Do you think if now that you exist, do you think if you started again, it would take you as long as you have?
Oh, I think we all know the answer to that question. Hell no.
But how much, right?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting paradox, though. We think that, you bring all that experience back to the table. Like, I'm sure you can speak.
Yeah,
for
we've
your
been going
experience.
half the time you have.
Well,
still,
I envy you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be going the same amount again, but we'll see.
Man, yeah. So we founded the company in 2015.
Yep.
And honestly, it was tough. Stripe was going to rule the world, and there were going to be no other payment. There's no scope in the minds of the capital markets that there would be any other payment platform out there. It was a winner takes all in a $3 trillion very complex industry. And I'm like, tell me how that's going to work. But that was the mindset of a lot of the VCs. Stripe's going to eat you for lunch, and I thought, well, we're doing totally different things.
Is that because the VCs don't quite understand the intricacies? Some of the VCs don't understand the intricacies?
Yeah,
they think Stripe does it all. So,
well, that's it. I think that's the optics, right? And my co-CEO always says that Paydock ran the VC education university for about 3 or 4 years.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, it was great.
That'd be a big campus.
Yeah, it was. Trust me, there was hundreds of no's, hundreds of declines, and I think for me as an Aussie, it's, really was hoping for more from, the capital markets. But I think we feel really fortunate to have been able to migrate to London, to keep our lights on, working with other fintechs here in the UK, and to have ultimately found a really good UK investor to help take payments to the next level with us. Yeah. And
what was different about that investor to the rest? Apart from the fact they said yes.
Yeah, I always. That's true, actually.
Although we love you forever.
Yeah. Well, we've all had experiences with VCs saying yes and then still not. There's the war stories. I think not dying over a long period of time allows you to make a lot of mistakes,
which you have to make.
Yeah, you can't not make the mistakes. I'm sorry.
Maths says you can't.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point you make, going half the time or twice the time. Maybe it's just been twice the amount of mistakes, which is counterintuitive, but I feel like every mistake we learn from, every failure is a way that you're putting more cement into the wall of your business. Agreed. And into your character and into your conviction and into your culture. So we've just been investing in that. And we've got people in Paydock who've been on this mental journey since day one, 8 years later, still on with the mission, on fire for what we're trying to do, because we see the problem and the opportunity as being that big and that exciting. Yeah. And I think there is a next generation of payments technology companies, infrastructure companies coming through. Paydock's one of them, who will be the next cohort of multi-billion-dollar payments businesses. It has to be, and we feel really fortunate that we've in with a shot. It's going to take a lot of tenacity to get through the next few years, but we're excited about it, and we feel like we've laid a good foundation. But I think to your question, what was different? I tend to rate my VCs based on the questions that they ask.
If they ask any.
If they ask any. And you know within the first 5 minutes, like, is this data just good data gathering, or is there genuine conviction and awareness of the dynamics of the industry? And I think and that's tough for, like yourself, you mentioned earlier, when you're very close to the problem set, you're deep in the trenches with your merchants, you're seeing things that others don't see. You've got a vantage point that others don't have. And how do you create conviction with someone else who just doesn't have the same experience for you? So I think there's always like a conflict between true innovation, and I think capital markets they lag badly, top of the bell curve type, off the backside really. I think true innovation is a lot more risky. It relies on the insight that people have in the trenches like you, and that can be hard to put into a spreadsheet.
Which, if it doesn't go into a spreadsheet, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Another great. I love my sayings, my quotes, but more fiction has been written in spreadsheets than ever, in the words of a novel.
Brilliant. It's so true. It's so true. So you were in Australia. So you started Paydock in Australia.
Yes.
And so you moved to the UK because you thought it would be good for the business? Is that the reason?
We did, yeah. We were finding it really hard going in Australia, but we'd worked really hard to plant a lot of seeds in the industry, and not long after coming to Australia, coming to the UK, we also found that our message was resonating with the market in Australia, which we feel really fortunate. Yeah.
Cheers.
Of course, right? So it just means a lot more plane flights. But we feel really thankful for that. And I think, we look fast forward to where we are now. I think generally there's an acceptance around this problem statement, which is fintech is really busy and noisy. Merchants feel a bit disempowered and they want more flexibility. Who can help? And there's a lot more data, a lot more awareness. We're really just in I would say a product market fit comfort zone now.
Nice.
Whereas back then when we made the move, we're still banging the pavement, pounding doors, pitching hard. And I think going from, hypothetically, Rob, we can see that would be a problem, but right now we'll just work with a single vendor, to today where merchants across the board say, actually we want to work with a cohort of vendors that suit our particular business requirements, and I need some help. And we tried doing it that way and it doesn't work anymore. So we're selling to a bleeding neck pain point now rather than a hypothetical future benefit. And I think that's made, I speak on behalf of everybody in our sector, that's made a real difference to the energy in our sector. So, we're fortunate to be, top few in the world for what we're doing. But, there's a long way to go in this sector. There's a lot.
When did you shift away from, I'm not saying you're not mission-led at all now, because you definitely are. And I'm enthused by how mission-led you are. I think it's great to see. But the original genesis of the business wasn't what it is today, which, that's going to be commanded by people who put money into the company, and they say, okay, it's great that you're supporting people that are not for profits and everything else, but you now work with banks and you work.
Yes.
A, when did that shift happen? But B, how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you were selling out?
Actually, I felt the opposite. I felt really excited.
Okay. Good.
And the reason is...
But can you see why I'd ask that?
Yeah. Look, I've been asked that before. It's like, is there a loss of integrity or a loss of focus? And if we come back to our founding principle, which is do as much good as you can to as many people as you can, there's a famous old hymn writer or something, and he said, earn as much as you can, save as much as you can, give as much as you can. And I think if we put that frame to the business and we say, hey, we want to build an incredible business that can give as much as it can, but also help as much as it can. Like, the best thing that we can do for the not-for-profit world is to build the best possible payments framework out there. And how do we do that? A lot of resourcing that isn't necessarily in the ecosystem of the NFP world. So I feel like if we can make Paydock the best possible payments platform in the world, then we're going to deliver the benefit we want to. We still sell to the sector. It's still there, So for us, it was about more is more.
Yeah,
in terms of momentum, in terms of cash, in terms, customer experience. The experience of our product is really important, but also building a great business is really important because that helps us build the best possible experience. So it's symbiotic and accretive. Yeah. So we haven't changed. I would just say we've extended.
Have you had any challenges with, you mentioned the early people that are still there, that are still banging the drum. And
Yeah.
I've got the same. We've got people in the company that I just think like, you're as mad as me. Let's go.
How good
right?
is that?
Have you had challenges with trying to hire and have people be as bought in and get frustrated with those people when they're not?
Yeah. Gee, that's hitting the nail on the head, I think. Have you?
Throughout my life.
Yeah.
Right? Where you make completely sort of, but you can meet friends and you think they're your sort of people and then you're disappointed. Do you know what I mean? So it's a hard thing to get people to come on exactly the same journey.
That's a great question. I wrestle with that every day. I don't think there's any secret answer. You're never going to get it right. You're never going to know during a hiring process. I mean, what is it that we offer people at Paydock? We give them the opportunity to do something really hard, borderline suffer in terms of the mental effort you got to put into something. And I think you only truly love something that you work hard for. Yeah. And I think that's not necessarily inherent in the way that we view mission and jobs and careers in the West in particular. So I wrestle with this. I think when I look at the people who are as mad as me, who've been there from the beginning, what defines us all is that we stuck around, that didn't make sense, we persevered, we believed that it would pop out somewhere, and we just kept cracking on. And we kept being honest with each other and maintaining good faith. And that is so hard to do. It is so hard to have a genuinely mission-driven culture, I would say, particularly when you're hiring. The payments industry is not a particularly mission-driven place in general.
Yours is the most mission-driven I've ever heard of.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really thank you for that. And I think people are attracted to our company because of it. And it's not just something we put on a resume. We really genuinely believe it. We see the outcome of our business. We see where we're trying to go. But I think in terms of developing a sense of mission, I think that comes down to an individual wanting that for themselves. I can't, I can create an environment and people can opt into it, but, don't have a gun to people's head, if it doesn't work.
Do you know, I've always said, and I don't know if this, I think this will probably resonate with you. I'm not right now in my job following my passion, right? And that's fine. But I've let my passion follow me. So every day when I go in,
that's good.
I'm super passionate about it. I just bring my passion to this thing.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's not my passion that I'm following.
Yeah.
I'm letting my passion follow me, which is a different way of looking at things.
Yes.
And it creates an energy, because no one in my company, when they were at school, said, I want to work in KYB. None of them.
All payments.
All payments, right? But everyone brings a passion that they have inside themselves to the game. And I think that's the only way that I can describe it, really.
Yeah. And it's a vehicle for the things we were talking about earlier, which is happiness, purpose, meaning. Like, business isn't the end in itself. It's a vehicle
100%.
for creating value, but also creating meaning and opportunity.
Yeah. Opportunity
and
for growth
stewarding.
and all this stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah. So, we hope that Paydock, you become seen as that, a company you would want to join, because we see ourselves as that vehicle for value, personal value for our employees, but also value, obviously, for our communities and for our customers. That's really important. I think if we compromise on that, like, we've lost our way. Like, we made
Have you been asked to compromise on that through the journey?
Oh, so many times.
It's really hard.
Day.
It's really
the
hard.
The temptation is there every day.
Of course it is. And I think your job with the stage you're at now is it's just making those decisions.
So hard. That is. I mean, we've had some big checks on the table, even, and at the end of the day, in the venture world, you're judged on annual recurring revenue. What's your ARR? What's your model? Yeah. Oh yeah, but we really like companies that are value led. That's the start of the conversation, but the end of the conversation is always, so what's your ARR again?
It's bollocks.
Yeah,
it's bollocks. They don't mean it.
No,
they do not mean it.
It's worse than marketing. It's borderline. In my personal experience, I'd say some of that is borderline deceptive, maybe not intentionally, but it certainly feels that way to me as a founder, where I say, well, you talk about these values, but then you don't actually value your values.
I just think it's lazy.
And I
think they just said something that they think is going to resonate.
You're going to get us in the door, going to get what? But then it just comes down to these threshold issues every day. And so I think finding investors with conviction around those things that matter, good people need to work with good people.
Fact.
And you stick together.
Yeah.
And it's not so much to do with your LinkedIn, history. It's got more to do with your character, your tenacity, your energy, your passion that you bring to the room. You put all those people in a room, watch the magic happen. Like, I didn't go get a degree in payments, doesn't exist. Here we are. you know.
100%. Well, you had to provide a degree to all the VCs you were speaking
that's
to,
right.
right?
That's right. That's right. And I can also tell them how to homeschool their kids in a trailer home.
But I love it. Do you know, I think one of the things that I've been proud of with doing this pod is that everybody that's been on it, if I said let's all get on a coach and spend 6 hours on the coach,
We'd have a party.
We'd have a really nice time, a really nice, considered, kind time, which I feel proud is a reflection of how I've been over the years. People I've met recently, people I've known for a while, and I actually think that's all that fucking matters.
I agree.
I really, because good stuff happens. Because you end up with good connections, and then as long as you have integrity, you do business deals because you find the right people. So you don't need to be a mercenary arsehole to win. You don't. You can just be nice.
You don't. And it's hard to keep reminding yourself of that sometimes, I think.
100% when there's pressure being laid on.
Yeah, and if you say, oh, you should be like this CEO, or you should be like that CEO.
Mate, the amount of times, I'll knock about in shorts all the time, like, the amount of times that people are like, have you considered maybe not putting a picture of you and your daughter on LinkedIn? No, I haven't. Do you know what? I'm going to put whatever I want on it, because your view of what a founder and a CEO is also different to the other person and the other person, the other person. I've wrestled with this during the company. People will be like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. But then the next person says you should be. And then the person after that says you should be doing a mix of the two. If I listen to people, I'd end up, you know, Mr. Ben, when he goes in and comes out in the costumes, I'd look like a different person every 20 minutes if I listen to how everybody... So you just got to be yourself, and you find the right people, is the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best pieces of advice, you know, right there for me personally. And if I could give to others, just take your own advice, trust your gut, because the same thing. Every VC, we speak to 100 VCs, we got 100 different, or 100 advisors, or 100, it's 100, you got to make the call. It's on you.
You're in the seat.
You're in the seat, and you are enough, and you have enough to make that call and go with it. And you know what? It'll probably not kill you. And I was like, I ask that question to myself all the time. It's like, but will I die? But we have sort of these, what Jeff Bezos calls them one-way doors, doesn't he?
Yeah, one-way doors. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I sort of reframe that maybe a little bit more existentially. You know, will we die if we make the decision and it's wrong? It's like, well, if your son can kill you, and you think but you know, I just think you've got to trust yourself and make your call. And the cancer is being slow. Excuse me. The cancer is really being slow.
100%.
You're slow, you die. And Sam Altman was talking about this recently, and he talked about the company that can iterate the fastest wins. Not the one who makes the best once in a fortnight decision. Yeah. The one who can iterate and I'm a big believer in that. And you look at Nassim Taleb, you know, his amazing writings, a lot of that is about iterations, cycles of things with big upside but managed downside. And
we've got a rule in the company, 2 weeks or 2 months. So if we're going to build a feature, it sits in one of those two brackets.
That's cool.
If we can't get it out in 2 months, do a smaller version and do 2 weeks. But anything we build will either take us one of those two time frames.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I like that. I like the boxing. The boxing gives you some targets because, you know, one thing we have at Paydock, it's as fast as you possibly can, you know, tends to be the theme, but sometimes that's a little bit vague. So you concrete it. Of course. Yeah. And then you know, anything you measure improves by bookending it. Like, you know, I assume you're on Strava. We're on Strava.
Yeah.
The first thing you do, right? Tell me if this is not true. The first thing you do is you go, did I get any medals on my PRs?
Yeah.
Right?
It's great.
It's arbitrary, but you measure it, so you seek to beat it.
Of course.
And you want that kind of competitive energy, even just competing against yourself. Like, I love triathlons. Yeah. And Carmen's like, oh, but what did you come in the triathlon? I'm like, well, I was really just looking at, did I beat my last time? Like, I'm in competition with myself.
Competing against yourself super
all the time.
Healthy.
Yeah.
I think people are like, well, it's not, you just relax.
I was like, have you seen the calves on that guy? I can't compete.
Get him on. Mate, that has been an absolute joy. Thank you very much.
So much fun. Thanks for having me. I loved it.
And that concludes another episode of Not What I Expected. I hope you loved that as much as I loved recording it. If you like it, let us know. If you don't, tell us how you think it could be better. Thanks, and see you again.